Privacy lost. In 2010, BBC did interviews for the Virtual Revolution documentary. It's 2021 right now, and many worries mentioned in the movie have manifested. So how did the internet go from an anonymous sandbox to a fully surveillance data machine?
The internet has a cultural and a very concrete cultural ideological context. It represents the fusion of the old military-industrial complex of Southern California and the hippie ethic of Northern California. Both were, in a sense, opposed to authority. And in a book written by Fred Turner, a Stanford University professor, an excellent book entitled From Counterculture to Cyberspace, he explains that very strange union, although on reflection it's not that strange, because both the military-industrial complex, which invented the internet, or at least financed the internet in the late 50s, and the counterculture of the late 60s in San Francisco were libertarian, were hostile to authority, hostile to the state, hostile to traditions. But what you have with the internet is a world, on the one hand, where a lot of young men, and they tend to be young men, spout a lot of nonsense, in my view, about democratization and egalitarianism and the opening up of everything. On the other hand, these young men are becoming infinitely rich and powerful.
There are a variety of threats to privacy online. The worst case scenario would be when information about a person is collected by a large, powerful institution, whether public or private, whether government or corporate, in a way that is used profoundly to their disadvantage, and where the individual has no control over the usage of that information. It is so much easier now to collect so much more information about what people do, what they read, what they see, what they buy, that in the hands of a government that has no respect for civil liberties, if you can imagine the sort of post-9/11 world run amok, there's an enormous threat that it would be used to silence political opposition and political opponents and enforce a kind of authoritarian regime. That's the scenario I worry about.
Thanks for the worries, but humanity has succeeded. Such things as political advertising on social media has occurred, Cambridge Analytica to skew voting results, social networks are already collecting plenty of information. The question may be, how do we give up all this information?
One way in which you'll give up personal information is obviously by clicking on one thing or another that reveals the sorts of things you're interested in. But how would they get from that to actually figuring out, for instance, who you are? Things like your birth date, your gender, and your postal code or zip code will allow people to figure out who you actually are, what your true name is. Now, how might a website get that information from you? Well, let's say you want to sign up for a horoscope. Then you're going to give them your birthday and probably tell them whether or not you're a man or a woman. Then maybe you want to find out what your local weather is. Probably the easiest way to do that is to put in your postal code or zip code. And bingo, they've got 3 pieces of information that are going to make it really easy for them to figure out exactly who you are. The information is coming to them almost for free. That is, your clickstream data just comes to the website, comes to advertisers without your actually having to do anything other than just going and clicking on things. So it's a very, very cheap and unobtrusive form of currency. I mean, probably the best thing about it is that it is so unobtrusive. You don't know you're giving it up, and so it seems entirely free to you. And then the consequences of it, maybe you get certain kinds of ads, maybe you get telephone solicitations, but you have no way of knowing that that's because you clicked on 17 things on these 5 websites, and so whatever it is that you're paying for it, you don't really make a connection to the information you're giving up. And I think, frankly, people see cash, individuals see cash differently because it's something that comes straight out of their pocket. The information they give up, they don't see it leaving, and they don't know what anyone's doing with it.
We knew we needed to build an advertising system, and I actually believe that on sometime in that first week, on the second or third day I worked here, someone pointed out that the goal really was to have ads that were as relevant and as targeted as search results, that added as much to the user experience. So that was the vision, from right when I started on. And with search, we don't need to guess. We know what they're thinking about because they just typed it into the box. And we were like, well, for an advertiser, that's the perfect moment. And so we knew there would be some element of demand. But the beauty of text ads is they're very cheap and easy to create. You can create a new sentence for every possible search, right? So this person searches for this, then you answer them with that. And you can actually have people write those creatives much more quickly than you can create banners. So it really worked for advertisers because one, they could be much more targeted. Two, they could create their advertisements much more cheaply. And it worked for us because it really enhanced the user experience by giving us a large volume of ads so we could find the very best ad for those users.
The fact of the matter is that we've already long ago given up much of our privacy as soon as we started to email and use mobile telephones. But if you thought about what it would be like if your neighbours knew details of your bank account or your medical record or could listen into your quarrels with your spouse, you would be very disconcerted because you would feel that you were losing control over areas of your life that just belong to you. We're exposing ourselves, we're stripping ourselves naked to the view of anybody who is interested to find out what we're doing. We know already that private agencies are keen to look at the pattern of use of the internet that we indulge in so that they can target advertising at us. And governments in the Western world, indeed in the world at large, are anxious to keep a record of who people are talking to, what kind of information they're finding out, so that they can detect patterns of, that suggest crime or terrorism in the offing. And in all these ways, therefore, we expose ourselves to view through the use of these devices. Not that we would want to give up using these devices, they're just so useful to us, but they do expose us to scrutiny. If you think about all the different aspects of your life, ranging from your income to your health, to your relationship with your employers, to your intimate relationships with your family, all the information, much of the information that's involved there is very, very important to you personally. It's very valuable to you because you're able to manage it, able to present yourself to other people, able to keep new ideas which are still rather tender, not ready for scrutiny, growing until they're ready to be aired publicly. In all these ways, we've got this real need to have a wide margin of personal discretion around us. And if other people know what's going on in our thoughts and in our personal records and communications, they've invaded that margin and they've made it less easy for us to control our own lives. We should be very worried, I think, about the amount of data concerning ourselves, including very personal, private, intimate data about ourselves, which is now out there in the public domain, both in private and in public hands. We should be worried about it for a large number of reasons, but one central reason is that this information is stored digitally in one or another location out there in a way that we may not have access to ourselves. And it's very, very easily manipulated. It's very easily changed by somebody who is either lazy, incompetent, or malevolent in some way. It's very easy for that information to be shared and for patterns of information to seem to appear to certain agencies that could put one under suspicion even if one weren't a suspicious individual. In other words, the prospect for misinformation, for corruption of our personal information, and for mistakes to be made about our personal information is massively increased by the fact that there is so much of it out there and so much of it is collated by different agencies. Inefficiency and patchiness of information is a great protection of personal privacy. And the more efficient the systems are that collect and collate data about us, the more the potential is for mistaken misuse.
Sherry, how is this generation different in terms of how much we give to other people in terms of our information?
Well, I think this generation has a sense that information wants to be free and information about themselves wants to be free. And in a way, there's a kind of self-surveillance that I think that young people don't think about in political terms. But it is a political issue. People put their lives on the screen. They put really intimate details of their lives out there, and with very little thought that there might be people using that information in ways that are not benign.
Most people are unaware of how exposed they've made themselves. You talk to young people, for example, who've got their own personal blog sites or their presence on YouTube or Facebook, and that they may come to regret doing some of the things they did on video on the internet, or saying the things that they did, especially when they start applying for jobs and employers begin to look back through the digital record of these people, the trace that they've left in the public domain. But quite unaware, every single day that we do something digital, we are potentially leaving a trace out there, and that if somebody wanted to find out where we were shopping, what we were doing, who we were communicating with, why we were doing it, what websites we were logging on to, they could do it. It's a very, very exposed set of media, these electronic communication devices that we now use. And the point is that they're fantastically convenient. None of us would willingly give them up. But what we would want, if we really thought carefully about what it meant whenever we use these devices, we would want much, much greater individual security for our communications.
We didn't, at the beginning or even in the middle of that, declare that the clothes we wore said things about us that other people judged us by, and therefore we became certain people in other people's eyes. But that is what we're doing online. We are clothing ourselves in data, unawares, and we are being judged as we're walking around the internet by who the cookies say we are, and who we declare we are by our Facebook profile or our Twitter stream, or what information we put into whatever website we might go to. Some of us are more aware than others that this is occurring. Most of us honestly have no idea, and if it got turned off tomorrow, would be upset because all of a sudden the services we had wouldn't be as good, because Amazon wouldn't know what they know about you, and eBay wouldn't know what they know about you, and for whatever reason, when you went to your favorite news site, the content you got wasn't customized to who you are.
Everything that could have gone wrong has happened, from algorithms deciding what kind of content you like, to kids oversharing their lives on TikTok to the public. Even finding a dating partner has moved to sorting algorithms. Especially with ongoing lockdowns, social lives are moved more and more to the online. Customers can get the exact advertisements for services and products based on their virtual data bodies. The economy is getting more efficient and privacy has been removed. People are voluntarily giving up their privacy for social life. And for the new generation, living online is just the norm.